Hi, Becky. I might not have time after class tomorrow to meet with you and discuss chapter 3 and 4 from last week's reflection, so I just figured I would make a video and do it. So this is my chapter 3 reflection. And I just wanted to start out with some big themes that I've seen in chapter 3 and 4, and then in 5 and 6 as well, and that was just so many paradoxical relationships when we're thinking all about all of this generational trauma and history and persisting effects of environmental injustice and colonialism. Um, and just the way that those paradoxes really make you stop and think, and nothing is black and white. And it's so hard, and maybe that's a reason that we haven't addressed any of these issues until pretty recently. But when you really stop and do the work and think about them, there always are solutions. So, yeah. And then another theme was just really the comparison of individualism and individualist thinking compared to community thinking, and putting the community first. And that plays into every concept we have thought about with this book. Yeah. And just some big things in chapter 3 for me was the paradoxical relationship between Native people and land management and resource management. And that's kind of resource-based versus relationship-based, which then even plays into that individualistic, capitalistic, resource-based versus relationship-based, and that's more community and reciprocal and giving and taking. And I liked the question on page 54 where it said, can Native people respect the integrity of their non-human relations in accordance with their cultural imperatives to honor land and simultaneously extract Earth's resources to escape poverty? And that was a really, really good question, and they really dove into examining that question further in chapter 3, and just talked about how they're really at the risk of pitting Native peoples against their own values, with a lot of different kinds of land management. And then they really just dove into all of these different, what I called weapons of genocide. And they talked about the doctrine of discovery and all sorts of different types of biological warfare, and even salvage ethnography and the way that we white people in the US have viewed Native people, and how that's always been completely controlled by white men in power, and whether they're viewed as savages or viewed as people in need of help, it's always been to the benefit of the colonist, the colonizer. And then damming, that was some of the most shocking, really gut-wrenching stuff in this chapter for me, was thinking about Colville Dam and the Hetch Hetchy Valley, and the sentence that they said was it was a seismic shock to the cultures and psyches of Native people. And what a great way to put that, seismic shock. Damming is crazy, and it really played into, I'm in river ecology this semester, and we've been talking a lot about what dams do to ecological environments and communities, and I think Native peoples were part of that, and it's crazy to think about in that context. The Osage Reign of Terror was crazy. I had never heard about that in my life, and I watched the documentary on that, and it blew my mind. The idea of wastelanding, where particular lands and particular bodies are deemed pollutable, that was really crazy to me. And resource extraction and just intentional endangerment of Native peoples and ecocide, they were all related, and they were all weapons of genocide. And I think my major takeaway from chapter 3 was just showing all of the things that Native peoples have been through, but they are resilient and they do persist. And I truly think that, like following the original instructions and a relationship based approach towards land management and towards existence on this planet is going to be the way to move forward, especially in a culture or in a climate changed world. Like, Native peoples have already been the first climate refugees. And that population continues to grow and continues to encompass more and more people. And I really think that Native peoples, especially in the US, have an opportunity to be the most effective leaders forward in this movement. And that led really well into the readings for this week about how they have been leaders in the environmental movement, and how other non-native environmentalists have helped and not helped that. So yeah, chapter 3.